I found this box in my parents' house of random things from my teenage years, and I brought over actual food vouchers. My family would get weekly food coupons that we would use because they were rationing bread and basic goods. And I remember the culture shock of coming here when I was 12 years old, and we moved to Virginia, so we immediately went from Moscow to suburbia America, and like it was like landing on a different planet.
What's the worst kind of thing that happened to you during those ghettoologist days? I just want to get back to that.
Oh gosh, there's so many stories. So I'm in the ghetto one day and I didn't bring my gun. I used to have a gun on my hip and I didn't. Just so happens that somebody let someone in the door who got released from the psych ward or something from a hospital. Like I knew right when I grabbed him and I had adrenaline going that I wasn't gonna be able to take this guy.
Before all this, I was a baseball player, and I got drafted by the Oakland A's, and that's all I ever wanted to do was play baseball. I played professionally for many years, but in the minor leagues, you don't make any money. So I was literally making $7,000 a year playing minor league baseball, and so I was forced into entrepreneurship. It's like, dude, if not me, then who?
So tell us a little bit about what's going on, who you are, and how it all came about.
Nobody knows how it all came about, Jack. I'm still trying to figure that out. How far back do you want me to take this story?
Like the short version, but like, I mean, obviously you came in as a child from former communist Greater Russia, right? Not necessarily Russia, but a different part, right?
Yeah, it was the Soviet Union. I was 12 when we immigrated here. It was right after the wall fell. So I'll date myself here, but we came in 92. Now I was 12 years old. So I remember living in Soviet Union vividly. I remember standing when I was 7, 8 years old on a regular basis, standing in bread lines. People think bread lines are like this euphemism that Republicans love to use to like scare people against socialism. No, like I stood in actual lines for bread on a regular basis when I was a child, 3-4 hour lines.
And we're not talking about the line around the block for the best bakery in town that just is very popular. No, just to get a piece of bread somewhere, right?
Right, just rye bread. You had a choice. You had a choice. You could choose any bread you wanted as long as it was rye bread.
Right. That's crazy. I mean, I was in Moscow in 1991, and I still saw some of these things happening. Literally, I was hosted by a family there. We were there with a band, with an orchestra, and we were all hosted in private kind of places. And every day, grandma was sent to town basically with her purse full of money to just go buy whatever she can find, because you can always trade whatever she could find with somebody else against something they found. Is that?
I still have, when we immigrated here, I found this recently. Everybody has like a box of weird stuff from their childhood that they haven't opened in 20 years. And I looked through, I found this box in my parents' house of random things from my teenage years. And I brought over actual food vouchers. My family would get weekly food coupons that we would use because they were rationing bread and basic goods. And again, this is not like Soviet Russia in the 1920s when they were just figuring out socialism, right? This is like 70 years later. At the end of it, they still couldn't figure it out. 70 years later, they still couldn't figure out how to feed people and deliver basic necessities to them. So yeah, I grew up there. I remember living there vividly. I remember lines for food and for basic necessities, and I remember the culture shock of coming here when I was 12 years old, and we moved to Virginia. So we immediately went from Moscow to suburbia America, and like it was like landing on a different planet. People were like strangers were smiling at us, which in and of itself was absolutely strange, because in Russia, like nobody smiled in general, and strangers definitely wouldn't smile at you. And I remember the first time when I was 12 years old, I walked into an American grocery store. And it was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's just aisles and aisles, shelves stocked with food and no lines and people fighting over it. And it was like we literally just landed in a different planet. So I remember all that stuff vividly, and gives me an appreciation for kind of basic things in life that my kids will never understand, unfortunately.
Yeah, did that appreciation ever go away, or you still remember it? I mean, you obviously still remember it, but did that kind of wane off over time and it got normalized, or you still have moments where you go back to that?
Well, no, of course, it normalizes. We as humans have a very easy time adjusting to improvements in life and making that the new normal. We have a very hard time adjusting our standards of living down and getting used to that. So, no, of course, on a regular basis, I no longer walk through grocery stores like,
Of course, yes. Whoa!
this is amazing. But I still have that memory. And so occasionally I do remind myself of kind of where we came from and just how good we have it, but also how easy it is to lose those things.
Yeah, yeah, it made you really aware, and then I know we're not only do we know each other for like something like 10 plus years, but I also see your very funny Facebook posts on a regular basis, and when you kind of make it a point either to call out some people, but also call out some situations about that is like because you bring that memory with you. There's like guys, you don't even have a clue what you're talking about when you talk about when certain things that you want socialism or you want certain things because you have lived in it and you know how the sad reality of it. So with that said, though, let's move into. So you come here, you're 12 years old, you grow up, and we fast forward to today. How has your life changed?
Well, I no longer stand in lines for bread, that's for sure. I came here. We're immigrants, right? So my parents obviously prioritized getting good grades in school, getting into a good college. I got a degree in finance. I left college. I worked on Wall Street for 6 years. I had a string of fairly prestigious jobs, trading bonds on Wall Street, and then I was structuring bond deals. And in the Great Recession of 2008, that all kind of came to an end. My corporate career ended. And at that point, I really just wasn't into it anymore anyway. I was really in it for the money. And luckily for me, the Great Recession happened and I got laid off because who knows how many more years I would have stuck around there just for the money, doing work I really wasn't meant to be doing things I really was not meant to do. So 2008, I went into business for myself. I got into real estate full time, and I started a software development business as well, and just been waking up and going to work every day since then, and having a lot of fun, right? And the difference is I get to create things now, which is very personally fulfilling to me. That was kind of a big when I left my corporate job. I said, what do I want out of life, right? And the answer wasn't like I just want a whole bunch of money. It was I no longer want to work for other people, and I no longer want to be a consumer. I want to be a creator. I want to be the person on the other end creating things that other people consume. That was kind of a big thing for me. And so those are the criteria around which I sort of built my career since then. I said I want to create things that are going to make an impact on people's lives and help people. But yes, coincidentally, in our society, the creators and the producers also happen to do better financially than the consumers and the worker bees. Those are just simple facts.
Yeah, absolutely. The consumers, well, they consume. Then there's what the participants, well, they participants, but the creators and the owners are making all the money. Right? Yeah. If you look at
Yeah,
that,
and rightfully so, right? Because that's the kind of society that drives. It's all about incentives, right? And so in this society, there are proper incentives set up for people to innovate, to create, to risk capital, and you get rewarded for creating things that ultimately the market rewards people that create things that actually help people. So yeah, so now I get to create buildings. I get to create software. We have a real estate education company just like you do, which helps a lot of people, and that's been very personally rewarding to me.
Wonderful. So let's talk about that. Let's go first into the building part of it. So you specialize, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, based on what I know about you, more in infill lots and either in residential or mixed use kind of development.
That's correct. So yeah, I don't do raw land development. We do infill development, which simply means that I buy typically either existing lots or I subdivide a larger piece of land into existing lots, but there's already utilities at the street, there's already roads. So I'm not doing raw land development where I'm subdividing land, building new roads, bringing utilities and infrastructure in, which from a development standpoint, infill development is simpler from that standpoint. And what we specialize as is in multifamily or mixed use development. So either apartments or apartments with a commercial component in those buildings. I want to be in position one day to decide to not work and have steady income coming in. You know, to me, like I truly, like I genuinely enjoy development, like the process of creation and seeing the vision come true. So I wouldn't say real estate is just a tool for me to create freedom, because I think I would do development even if I was a billionaire. I'd still develop real estate. But ultimately, like that's what this is, right? All the businesses that we have, they are a vehicle for us to have optionality in life and to have time freedom. And even if we choose to use that time freedom now to work as hard as we ever have, you know, we're doing it for our families, and we're doing it because we get to do stuff that we love.
Yeah.
And that makes us very lucky.
I got myself to 217 single family homes at my peak. That was 2014. I've been in the business 25 years. And as a young boy back in 1996, I was sold on the dream. They told me, meaning Carlton Sheets, Russ Whitney, watching those infomercials back as a 17-year-old boy in my parents' house, they told me if I buy rental property, I will be rich and rewarded beyond my wildest imagination. So that's all I've ever done. I got into the business at 18 years old, and I've never done anything but real estate. And that's what I bought into, was buy rentals, and you're set for life.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good point to that there's some truth to that. It's just not going to happen overnight. Right? It's
not going to happen overnight. No.
Because in your case, you raise the money, you build up the portfolio to build to 200 something, 17 units. Then finally you paid off, once the values had increased, you sold off half to pay off the other half. And then the cash flow started coming in at least semi-decently, right?
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay, let's talk about that. Right.
So this is a great story. It's about you. So this is perfect. So January 17, whole portfolio is paid for. I'm probably making 50 grand a month off those doors, net. I thought I arrived, and it was good money. It was a lot of work, still managing those doors. And I come to a Collective Genius Mastermind, and I see my dear friend Jack Bosch. Hey, Jack, how are you? We're talking, and we talked about something, and you said to me, it's like, Jack, I got a portfolio of 125 doors. They're paid for. It's probably worth, I don't know, $9 million or something. And I have infinite cash flow because it's all paid for. Blah, blah. You go, that's good. That's good for ROI. And you said to me, well, what's your ROE? And I said, what is that? And you said return on equity. And that was the day everything changed for me, because I realized then, making 600 grand on a $10 million portfolio, and 600 grand was probably on a good day, because there was a lot of months where I still would make $25,000 off all that rent.
All these extra furnaces and those things that keep racking. Yes.
And that day changed for me. It took me a little while, because I'm a hard teach, but it took me a little while on that day in 2018. But then COVID hit and the property values really took off. So I decided to sell the lion's share of my portfolio, and I have been doing it the past couple of years.
What's the worst kind of thing that happened to you during those ghettoologist days? I just want to get back to that.
Oh gosh, there's so many stories. So I'm in the ghetto one day, and you ever hear those stories about police officers have been police officers for like 30 years, and the one day they don't wear their vest, they get shot or killed in the line of duty? It's like, I wore it for 30 years, and the one day I don't, I get killed in the line of duty. Well, similar, not compare myself to a police officer. Their job is very hard and all that. But one day I went to the ghetto and I didn't bring my gun. I used to have a gun on my hip and I didn't. And it just so happened that day I was at an apartment building I owned. I owned a 48-unit apartment building at that time. And I go there and meet with my manager. And just so happens that somebody let someone in the door who got released from the psych ward or something from a hospital. He had a PICC line in his arm, and he was on, this is things you learn in the ghetto, he was on wet. Now, if you don't, do you know what wet is?
No idea.
It's wet is when someone inhales, huffs, however they do it, embalming fluid.
Okay.
Yeah. It gets you, if you can't get drugs, you do that, and it makes you crazy. You go out of your mind. So this guy approaches, he comes into the hallway of the building, and my manager and I are there, and his eyes are coming out of his head. And he's kind of a big guy. I mean, he's about 6 foot. I'm 6 foot, you know, so we're about the same size, but I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's trying to start a problem. He wanted something. And I go to grab him to like push him back, and I could feel his strength. He had like superhuman strength, right? Like whatever he was on, like I knew right when I grabbed him, and I had adrenaline going, that I wasn't gonna be able to take this guy. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a gun on me. So I ran back to our little maintenance center, and I grab a hammer. I'm like, I'm gonna have to hit him with a hammer, like in the head. And I remember walking back, my building manager's kind of tied up with him, and I got this hammer, and I'm kind of going like this, feeling the hammer, because the hammer didn't feel very heavy to me. Like usually a hammer would have some weight to it, you know? Like it doesn't feel heavy. Maybe it's gonna have an adrenaline rush. But I came to find out later, it didn't feel heavy to me because it was a hammer that was bought at the dollar store. Okay. So it was a dollar store hammer. So it didn't have any weight. Right. So I'm walking and I'm thinking, I'm going to hit him, and it's just going to make him madder at me, right? Like it's not going to do anything. It's like a little, like almost like a fake hammer. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, this isn't going to work. I drop the hammer, and I see my building manager kind of tied up with him. And he looks at me, I look at him, and I just push him out this steel door and pull my manager back in, and I pulled the door shut. And at that point, he was on the outside. We were on the inside. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. All right. He can't get back in, lock the building down. And then within a few minutes, like 3 police officers ended up pulling up to the building. They drew down on him, and they didn't shoot him, but they had him in cuffs, and away he went. That was probably one of the scariest things ever happened to me. Okay, now, if I would have had a gun, though, probably wouldn't have been a good day for that gentleman.
So now here's Joe driving his Bentley to his lake house, looking for a place in Windermere, Florida to go with a family and things like that. But sometimes in business and life, particularly in real estate, you got to be ready to be prepared to face some difficult situations. Hey, so tell us, what does Ryan Pineda do? All the things you do.
You know, the 2-minute version is, before all this, I was a baseball player, and you know, I got drafted by the Oakland A's, and that's all I ever wanted to do was play baseball. You know, I played professionally for many years, but in the minor leagues, you don't make any money. So I was literally making $7,000 a year playing minor league baseball. And so I was forced into entrepreneurship. You know, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I never wanted to be a real estate investor. I didn't care about any of it. And, you know, as time went on, I got pretty good at flipping things and finding deals and negotiating and marketing and all the skills that you need to be a good entrepreneur. I didn't realize I was just developing them naturally, like, because I knew they were just needed to run businesses. So, you know, as time went on, ended up getting into house flipping, which became kind of like my first big endeavor, and, you know, became a millionaire that way. And then eventually that led to other businesses like tax firm, like brokerage, and, you know, some other things. Got into education, got into social media, and, you know, it's just opened the door for lots of different businesses. When I first got started, it was very different than what it is today. When I first got started, I said, you know what? I want to be known as I want to be the most known house flipper on social media. That was my goal. It was a very attainable goal. I felt like there wasn't like that many guys out there, and I knew I had the credibility to do it. And I felt like I achieved it after a couple of years. From there, it was like, what's next? I'm not going to just talk about real estate all day. And so I start talking about entrepreneurship. I start talking about faith. I start talking about family and relationships. And then this idea of the wealthy way comes about. And I realized that that is the most important thing to me because, you know, I see all these people trying to make all this money and then they get divorced. They don't have a relationship with their kids. They have no faith. They're out of shape. Their health sucks. And I'm like,
so describe the wealthy way to me.
Yeah. So, you know, The Wealthy Way is a book I wrote about a year ago almost. And, you know, it's still a bestseller today. But, you know, it was this philosophy on life. They basically, the question I kept getting, going back to demand, when somebody asks you a question so many times or wants something, you know that there's demand and there's a product for it. So the number one question I kept getting asked was, how do you manage it all? Like, you're golfing here on Friday. You leave the office every day at 5. You don't work on the weekends. You're, you know, doing stuff at church. You're holding these Bible studies. You're in shape. Like, how is it even possible? And I was like, I mean, to me, it's not that hard because I just have like a system and a routine. And
that's how we started the podcast. I asked the exact same question.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And that was how The Wealthy Way came about. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to create it into something that people can understand. And so like that is what The Wealthy Way is. It's the philosophy of how I live my life and how I believe everyone should live their life and how you can truly, you know, be abundant in all areas, how you can have great relationships, how you can build your wealth, how you can, you know, be in shape, how you can be spirit filled, all those things. And people have really resonated with the movement, man. And, you know, we get so many people in our coaching programs who come in because, not because they like want to get super rich in real estate or business. They're like, dude, I just want what you're talking about. Like, I'm good if I make a couple $100,000. I just want to spend more time with my kids. Like, that's what's important to me. I want to serve in my church. And so I think this message of the wealthy way is the most important thing to me. And I, truthfully, the big part of it is the faith element. And it's like, that's what's always guided me every step of the way. It's like, you know, whether I was making $7,000 a year playing baseball or to where I'm at today, I've always been happy and content. Like you would have never heard me complain back then when I was making $7,000. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I was doing exactly what I felt like God was calling me to do at the time. And then even today, it's like, yeah, okay, we make more money, but guess what? I have like 1,000 times more problems than I did back then. Oh. And you'll never hear me complain about it. I'm just like, this is what comes with, you know, doing a lot of stuff. And for me, when I just look at the social media landscape today, if 3 years ago, the goal was become the most known house flipper, today it's like, what's the biggest need in the world and the field I play in? And I feel like the biggest need at this point is a Christian entrepreneur who all these other Christian entrepreneurs and business people can relate to and hear from, because nobody's really out there doing it. Like all the big entrepreneurs you see today, they're not Christian. They all subscribe to the hustle culture. They all subscribe to, you know, they've been divorced. They're like, dude, you don't need to hang out with your kid, like grind. And I'm like, guys, you guys are idiots. You don't get it. You guys have made a bunch of money, but your lives suck. I know what your lives are like behind the scenes. I've met you, you know, I hear the stories. And so to me, it's like, dude, if not me, then who?
Right.
And so that's kind of like my mission now.
I like that. If not me, then who? That's so few people say that. Like most people say, like somebody needs to do something. Somebody needs to do it, and nobody says like, hey, how about me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not me? Putting this all together and keeping it all organized requires almost like a special sense for simplifying. Do you think you have a specific gift of simplifying things for people?
Dude, you're the first person to ask me that, and I'm glad you brought it up, because that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. When I look at the most like famous podcasts and people really like people that they resonate with, I see a lot of like detail and confusion. So to give you an example, a lot of these mindset guys are like really big, psychology, like Jordan Peterson and everything else. And so like you'll see these people, Joe Rogan's even an example of this. They're like, yeah, well, so the left brain tells you this and then that, and they'll do, you know, like they'll go really in depth on a thing. And then they'll be like, so that's why I meditate, right? And it'll take like 20 minutes to get to that conclusion. And I'll just be like, guys, you need to pray. And that's it. It took me 1 second to say that. It's like, guys, just pray, right? Then the rest of the world will continue on these crazy things. They'll be like, hey, so, you know, you need to take psychedelics and you need to go do shrooms and you need to, like, these are the new things that are going to help you achieve higher calling. And I'm like, no, you just need Jesus. Read your Bible and you're going to be fine. And, you know, people will be like, what's your favorite leadership book? What's your, you know, how do you know what to like manage people and stuff? I'm like, I literally just read the Bible every day, and I just do, I try to do what Jesus did and how he led from a servant heart. And that's it. Because guess what? He was the best leader. Why am I going to go try and learn what this guy has to say about leadership? He ain't the best. And, you know, it's just like, to me, it's so simple because of faith, but I understand why everyone makes it so complex.
But even from like in any other kind of pieces, when I hear the wealthy way, the way you explained it, it's very, very simple.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's very, very simple. Yet everyone out there struggles because they get sucked into the day-to-day minutia instead of focusing on the simple, basic building blocks, right? Yeah. And I'm also a simplifier. So like my wife, Michelle, she's like, she's a multiplier. She looks at things and she's like, okay, we can build this into this. And I was like, yes, but if we keep it in this structure, simple structure, we can accomplish without these 17 tentacles that are out there, right?
Yeah,
So together we're a great couple, right? Because we just one multiplies, the other simplifies, right?
Yeah.
But even in concepts, like even in podcasts sometimes, or in somebody explains a really complex scenario, and I was like, so what he essentially saying is this, and this, right? And they're like, yes. And I hear you doing the exact same thing. That's why I was asking if you consider yourself that.
Oh, for sure, dude. Yeah. I'm like, I try to keep it so basic. And I'll tell you, not many people, like that's a talent in itself to be able to simplify and all that. One guy who actually is very good at that is Cardone. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people think Cardone is just like brash and just like to the point. And
no, he's a very sophisticated guy, very smart guy.
Oh, like if you ever talk to him behind the scenes, you're like, this guy has a lot. But the way that he's able to just simply say what he needs to, because like Cardone's answered everything, people get tired of it. He's like, just 10x it. And like the truth is, he's right. At the end of the day, oh, you want to grow your business? Well, 10x your leads. Like just get 10 times more of the leads and your business will grow. That's what you're missing. And they're like, but what should I do here, there? And then he's like, no, just get 10 times more leads and the rest will take care of itself. And that's kind of like how I try to think of things. It's like, what's one thing I can do? And then the rest will take care of itself. And I think you learn that in sports, like especially in golf. The golf swing is so complex to make it right. And I've analyzed so many things, right? But then there's one thing that you do where it's like, if I just think, bring my club right here, the rest takes care of itself and everything functions properly. And so in sports, you don't have time to think about every little mechanical detail of an action. All you have is time to react. And so if you're going to succeed, you have to have one simple thought that's basically the catalyst to what makes you do things properly.